Okay, so good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We're really pleased to be able to host these online learning events for you. We have a chat function which we invite you to use throughout the session to share any questions or any thoughts that you would like to share with us. Alex will be monitoring that for us, and she will raise them at appropriate points through the session, or potentially at the end where we have some specific time for questions and answers. We just politely ask you not to share any personal information in there or specific information to safeguard the identities of everyone you might be talking about. But other than that, please enjoy the session. You will see I'm joined by Lisa and Louise, who will be signing for some of our attendees this evening, and I'm going to do my very best to talk at a pace that enables them to be supportive in their roles. So this session is titled Understanding Behaviour. I've been assigned to deliver this as I am from the Social, Emotional and Mental Health Strategy team in the local authority. My name is Leanne. We're a very small team of 4 people. And everything we do for children in terms of social, emotional and mental health is framed under this idea of understanding their behaviour and supporting their emotional well-being, as opposed to managing their behaviour, which you'll see through the session evokes a very different response. So the plan for this session is to give you a bit of an overview about the Essex approach to understanding behaviour. We'll then share a little bit of information about what you can expect from the schools and settings that your children are attending. We'll share some top tips from our perspective on understanding behaviour and supporting wellbeing and engaging with their schools and settings around that. We'll offer some signposting to additional support that you could access. And then, as I mentioned, there will be some time for questions and answers at the end if there's anything you wanted to raise through the chat function. The first section is understanding the Essex approach to understanding behaviour. So everything that we do as a strategy team is underpinned by these very simple values of compassion and kindness, hope, connection and belonging. And these are the values and principles that we want to apply to enable us to understand behaviour and support emotional well-being. And you can see on the slide here underneath, it says compassion and kindness is instead of blame and shame. We're trying to change our mindsets and change our culture to be one of much more compassion and kindness. And we don't want to be using approaches that leave a child feeling blame and shame through the interaction or the strategy that's used. We have hope instead of hopelessness. We want children and young people to be aspirational for their future, to believe that there is an exciting future ahead for them, that they can achieve things, that they are worthy and that there's hope for them. And any kind of strategy or response that makes them feel hopeless is going to be counterproductive to that. And then connection and belonging is instead of disconnection. So we know that relationships are the core to any successful support with behaviour and emotional well-being. So connection and belonging is absolutely key to that. If a child feels disconnected, they're not going to be able to rely on a trusted adult or a trusted peer to support them through their well-being needs. So that's a bit of an overview of our values. Everything that we do as a team, we're asking the questions: does this support connection and belonging? Does this provide hope? And is this based in connection and belonging and compassion and kindness? So hopefully you'll see throughout this session, everything we talk about has those values running through it. So what we mean when we say understanding behaviour and supporting emotional well-being instead of behaviour management is that if we make a shift from Instead of treating behaviour as misbehaviour, which would result in a punishment, we treat behaviour as stress. It means we're more inclined to help and support. So we're really reframing our understanding of children's behaviour. So the principles of this approach are outlined on this slide, and I'll go through them with you. So behaviour is communication, and it's something to interpret. We take the approach that all behaviour is communication, and they are using their behaviours and their interactions and their actions to show us something about how they're feeling. It's our job as adults to interpret and attempt to understand that. Children and young people are prone to making mistakes. They are learning along the way. They're going to get things wrong, and they should be allowed to get things wrong. That gives us as adults an opportunity to coach them through a learning opportunity. Behaviour management is predominantly delivered through relationships. And by this we mean if someone needs to provide a difficult outcome or a consequence to a behaviour, if that's done by someone that the child trusts and values, that behaviour management approach is going to land much more sensitively with that child. They're going to believe that that adult has their best interests at heart. Without that quality relationship, the outcome and consequence has far less meaning. Children who can't yet engage should be understood and included. And this is where an aspect of hope is coming on. If they're not able to engage right now, it doesn't mean they never will be able to. There is hope for them, and it's our job as adults to understand them, include them, to enable to learn new skills so that they can engage in the future. Boundaries are essential and are there to keep everyone safe and meet people's needs. So this isn't about throwing out boundaries and taking a soft approach. This is about establishing boundaries that are clear and fair and are there for reasons of keeping people safe and meeting needs. So they're really purposeful. Rules are also necessary to keep people safe, but they should be developed together and adapted where needed. So it's okay to have a policy with a set of rules through it, but there should be room for reasonable adjustments to those rules to enable everyone to act safely within them. Consequences should be used within a process of restore and repair, and this links back to that idea of behaviour management happening through relationships. If we need to issue a consequence or a difficult outcome for a child from their behaviour, it needs to be supported by a restorative conversation or approach that enables them to repair any damage that is caused in the relationships around them. Inappropriate behaviour should be seen as a sign of unmet need. This links back to us understanding that all behaviour is communication, and if we can see that actually that behaviour wasn't appropriate, it wasn't safe, we need to say that child is telling us they have a need we've got to support them with. The causes of difficulties that we might see in that behaviour are mostly and usually in the context of the environment and in the context of the relationships within that environment. So these can be adapted. We can make adjustments to environments. We can build our relationships with young people. So there's hope within that because they are not within the child. They're not at the blame of the child. They are contextual. The solutions to these lie in understanding what that behaviour tells us about their need. That's about us taking responsibility for being curious about what that child is trying to tell us. And practice and policy effectiveness is measured by well-being and the capacity to make reasonable adjustments to meet the needs. So if a school or setting has a policy or a particular practice that doesn't enable us to consider children's well-being and doesn't allow movement for reasonable adjustment, actually what we're saying is that's not a particularly effective policy. There needs to be that flexibility. So you can see how those values that I talked about before are woven through these principles here, And these are the principles that we are trying to share across all of our schools and settings through a training package called Trauma Perceptive Practice, or TPP for short. And some of you may have heard of that. I'll go into a little bit more detail about it as we carry on. One of the core messages of understanding children's behaviour and development is this concept of their brain development, and we like the model of an upstairs and a downstairs brain. This works really well. You can share this with children. It's really accessible model. It's not complicated brain science, which is great. It makes it easy for all of us to share an understanding. So we use this analogy of a house to describe brain development. So the downstairs brain develops first. This is in charge of our survival skills. So it takes care of breathing, of our heart beating, and it keeps us safe from harm. So when we react to danger in a stressful situation, it ensures that we are able to survive. The downstairs brain takes care of all of that. The upstairs brain develops later in life, and actually science is telling us that the upper part of the brain, which takes care of language, understanding, empathy, relationship skills, that isn't fully developed until about the age of 25 years old. So if we think about the expectations we put on our children, young people, of being able to handle all of their stress and cope in all of their situations and build that relationship and attend to that subject in school and be calm under pressure, it's actually really unrealistic of all young children and young people, and some young adults, but particularly those with SEND as well, and perhaps those who are neurodiverse. Their brain does not have the functionality to be able to do that. So we need to be mindful of that as adults, that these children are still learning and their brain connections are still developing. Now, what happens in particularly in a young brain, but it can happen in an adult brain as well, is when we are stressed, we get trapped in that survival state, because that's the priority for our brain. We must survive. So in the analogy of a house, the stair gate is going to shut and trap you downstairs. And down here, your priority is making it through the day, surviving, running away from the saber-toothed tiger. You don't then have access to all of those luxuries of the upstairs brain. You don't have access to logic. You don't have access to understanding, to language, to have a conversation about how you're feeling or what's going on. So this is where we see children in distressed states when they are stressed. And this is where we can see those behaviours that cause us concern and worry us for their well-being. I'm going to share a video which explains the different parts of the brain really clearly, and talks about the impact stress can have on a child's state of arousal. It's a video with some music in the background and subtitles, and it's also narrated as well. So hopefully it will be accessible for you all. It's just short of 7 minutes long, so make sure you're comfy to settle down to watch this. I'm just going to switch over the screen to the video. Here we go. Hopefully someone will tell me you can hear that.
Of tolerance. A child's brain can be divided into three different areas. The first brain area to develop in the womb is the brainstem. This is the part of the brain responsible for keeping the child alive when in danger. It does this by taking the child into a fight, flight, freeze, or collapse state when it perceives threat. The second area to develop from around 9 months old is called the limbic brain. This is the area of the brain that is responsible for the child's emotional maturity, their behaviour control, and their ability to have healthy relationships. The third area of the brain to develop is called the cortical brain. This is responsible for learning, language, reflection, morality, processing information and planning. The cortical brain has fully developed by the age of 25 years. To understand the behaviour of a traumatised child, it's helpful to understand that each child has a unique window of tolerance. When they are within their window of tolerance, they can think, love, learn, empathise, be playful, explore, reflect, and use words to describe their feelings. They are at their personal best. When they feel pushed out of their window of tolerance, either to the upper level, hyper-aroused, or the lower level, hypo-aroused, then their cortical thinking brain goes offline. It literally gets disconnected from the rest of their brain. They experience a neurochemical change.
Hello everyone, I'm just going to pause it for a second just to make that connection there for you. The upstairs and the downstairs brain that I mentioned earlier. So they've explained the different parts of the brain and showing the disconnection. Before I continue playing the video, you can see how this connects into us understanding behaviour, but just a little bit of a warning, if you like. The remainder of this video talks a lot about traumatic experiences, and I want to caveat that this video is useful for understanding behaviour more generally than just those that are traumatic. All stress is worth us understanding in this model. So please don't feel overwhelmed by its reference to trauma, and hear stress and understand the behaviour throughout this. But if you find the video tricky, just take a moment for yourself and then come back at the end.
Change. They swing into their brainstem and they feel distress. Each child has unique triggers which push them out of their window of tolerance. A child can be pushed just outside their window or way outside their window, leading to either mild or extreme distress. Children faced with their triggers who swing into hyper-arousal go into fight, flight, freeze mode. On the inside, they feel anxious, overwhelmed, frightened, and sometimes terrified and angry. Their body changes. Their heart rate increases, they get shaky, and they might get body pains. Their body is getting ready to fight, run, or freeze. We know they are not in danger, but their brain does not know this. On the outside, they appear aggressive or anxious, or obsessive or controlling. Children faced with their triggers who swing into hypo-arousal go into collapse mode. On the inside, they feel empty, dead inside, flat, shut down, disconnected, just nothing. Their body changes, their heart rate decreases, and they get ready to feign death as a survival strategy. On the outside, they appear withdrawn, quiet, hard to reach, emotionless, inactive, unproductive, and unable to learn, relate, or engage. Children who have experienced trauma and loss swing from hyper-aroused to hypo-aroused, with limited amounts of time within their window of tolerance. Their window of tolerance is smaller than other children's. Our job as adults supporting the child is to help them expand their window of tolerance, as this is where they can learn, love, and be loved. We can do this by teaching them how to notice, communicate, and manage their emotions, and how to bring themselves back into the personal window of tolerance. By regulating their feelings for them and with them, we show them that their emotions are not dangerous and can be tolerated. We can also help by identifying their triggers and creating an environment that feels as safe as possible for them. We must work hard to stay within our own window of tolerance in order for us to help children stay within theirs. Adults, stay hopeful and calm. A child's stress response can be reduced with the right support in the right place at the right time.
Okay, hopefully you found that interesting and useful to give a description of why it's so important to understand the behaviour and support them through their well-being and their stress, rather than simply take approach of just managing behaviour. We need to understand what the stresses are, what the triggers are, and what it is that's pushing them outside of their window of tolerance, and what we can do as adults to help expand them to be able to bear more of their daily stresses as they grow. Is there anything in the chat, Alex, that you wanted to pick up before we move on that section?
There's not at the moment, Leanne, no, but I am keeping an eye, so if anyone wants to ask any questions, please do pop them in the chat.
Lovely, thanks, Alex. Okay, so the next section we'll cover is what families can expect from schools, and this is something we're working towards across Essex, so it's not something that is perfect everywhere yet by any means, but it is certainly our ambition, and we are making great headway on these approaches. So what we are encouraging and training schools and settings to be doing is delivering on these qualities for you and for your children. So we would want them to have a quality of trust where they are committed to providing emotional security for your children and for you as well, so that you can have a response and your child can have a response that says, I believe that my school is willing to support me in a way that is supportive. They're going to respond. You'll trust them with that. We want a quality of openness. So there's a commitment to honesty in all areas of school life, so that you can say, I'm able to share my feelings, my child is able to share their feelings, and we're open with those around us. And you feel safe to do that. We want there to be a quality of support, so there is a commitment to taking a genuine interest in the experiences of yourself and your children, so that your children can say, my school supports me personally as well as academically. So looking at the whole child being supported here. A quality of relatedness. So there's a commitment of bringing people together and forming a sense of belonging, so that children and yourselves as parents and carers can say, I feel connected within my school community and I feel a strong sense of belonging here. And then finally, we want there to be a quality of respect. So there's a commitment to taking the time to get a deeper understanding of each other's needs within the school, so that children can say, the adults in my school appreciate me and they value the unique contribution I can make. So these are qualities we're looking for in a school or a setting that is embracing this way of working. Now, as I mentioned, we are working towards this across all of our schools. There are just shy of 600 schools and colleges across Essex, and over 400 of those have already engaged in this way of working, so are on their journey and are learning how to work in this way and training their staff to be better at understanding behaviour and supporting emotional well-being. This is a big change because it's not necessarily taught in teacher training. So it's part of an additional approach and a culture change in schools that will take time, but we are certainly committed to and are working really hard on it. And there are some schools that are doing a brilliant job of this already, which we're really proud of. So the approach we're taking is called trauma perceptive practice. It's a training approach where every school or setting who is engaged in this has a trainer in their school leading this right there in the setting. They're not reliant on someone external coming in and doing this for them. They're really taking it into their own hearts and minds and embracing those values that we talked about earlier. Now, if your child attends a school or a setting that is engaged in trauma perceptive practice, what we hope you should notice is some changes in the culture and the practice. Now, this will be a whole school or setting approach to behaviour that is based on those values of compassion and kindness, hope, connection and belonging. We're hoping you'll start to experience some conversations that use far more helpful language to describe your child's behaviours. So if I give an example of this, we might not be, we wouldn't want to hear the term "they're kicking off." When a child is stressed and dysregulated and showing us through their behaviour that they need help, we'd want to hear that kind of language instead. So it feels more empathetic in the descriptions they're giving. We'd hope that you would notice a focus on your child's strengths and areas that they can build on and be really hopeful and aspirational in. We'd hope that you would see policies and practice that reflect our values, that do promote connection and belonging rather than disconnection, that are hopeful rather than punitive, and are compassionate and kind rather than shame-inducing for your children and indeed for parents and carers. We'd like to see the staff acting as stress detectives, being curious about what's going on for this child. What are they communicating to me through their behaviours? What is it I need to understand about their needs? And for schools that have really embraced this, we'd like to see, or you would hope to see, a family learning offer where they share this with you as well. Our training offer is for schools and settings, but then once they're confident in that, we do provide them with the materials and the skills to be able to share that with their wider community, particularly with their families. So we're hoping that once school reaches that stage, you will start to notice they'll start sharing that information with you as well. So to go a little bit deeper into this idea of helpful language and that description when people are talking about how your child is behaving, this is a little bit of the model we're using, and we're inviting staff to reframe their understanding of behaviour. And we can do that through how we talk about what we observe and how we write about what we observe as well. So some unhelpful language that we might have historically or even still currently be hearing are on the left-hand side here. Phrases like unacceptable behaviour, that child is naughty, that child is lazy or not engaging, the child is rude or aggressive, or they're kicking off or having a meltdown, or that child is attention seeking. These are all quite unhelpful descriptions of a child's needs. They don't allow for empathy. By their nature, they prompt a punitive reaction to managing this behaviour. So what we're doing by reframing is trying to offer helpful alternatives that promote more empathy in our responses to behaviour. So actually there is no such thing as unacceptable behaviour. There could be behaviour that is unsafe and that creates risk. But actually, if we understand that all behaviour is communication, then all behaviour is understandable. And it's our job to seek to understand that. I think naughty is used less and less nowadays, but we do still hear it occasionally, and more in conversationally than written down, certainly. But we'd want to be encouraging alternatives such as dysregulated or stressed, or a communication of their unmet needs. All of those descriptions prompt us as adults to help that child. It prompts us to do something to relieve their stress or to meet their need for them. Any language that talks about the child being avoidant, withdrawn, lazy or not engaged, what we're seeing here is a description of low mood, of that hypoarousal state, which we saw in the video underneath their window of tolerance. This is a stress response as well. And we need to recognise that perhaps these children need a boost. They need to be uplifted. And again, that's our job as an adult, to recognise that in them and provide them with the support that enables them to do that. Any description that uses language such as rude, defiant, aggressive, kicking off or meltdown, these descriptions nearly always result in quite a harsh punitive consequence. And actually, they're communicating to us that perhaps that they are stressed, maybe they're fearful, they don't feel safe. And from that video of the window of tolerance, we understand that they're hyper-aroused. This is a stress response due to them feeling threatened and needing to protect themselves. So if we take that interpretation of their behaviour, our response to that will be one that enables them to share our calm energy, to take them to a place where they feel safe, to give them the tools they need to communicate their frustrations or their fear more effectively. And then attention seeking is a really interesting one. I think there's nothing wrong with a child seeking attention. If that's what they need, let's give them some attention, but it does now have a negative connotation to it. So we're reframing that in line with our values to connection needing. And what they're looking for is a sense of belonging and the safety of a positive relationship. And that prompts us as an adult to connect with them and to enable them to feel safe and heard and seen. So you can see just small shifts in our language make a huge difference to our response to their behaviours. Now, what we would expect from schools on any level is a personalised response and a personalised support. And this can take a few different forms, and we've got a few examples here. So we'd expect to see reflective analysis of the behaviour that's being observed. This is about us better understanding their needs and about us knowing them well. I couldn't provide a personalised reflective account of behaviour of a child that I don't know, because I don't have the knowledge of them as a whole person to understand their needs. It's really important that they have a quality relationship that enables that adult to reflect fairly on the behaviour that's being used to communicate. Personalised support should also come with co-regulation or adult response plans. These are personalised plans. Historically, they would have been called behaviour management plans. We're now calling them adult response plans because behaviour management is about fixing something within the child. Adult response is about the responsibility we hold in supporting them. And as we know, because the child's brain isn't fully developed, they can't possibly know how to do all of these things on their own. They need our adult brain to co-regulate and do that with them and for them sometimes. For those children that are a little bit older or are a little bit more self-aware, they could self-regulate. And then they should have self-regulation plans which are personalised to them, which say, if I'm feeling this way, here's a strategy I can use to make myself feel better and get back into my window of tolerance. We would expect to see intentional teaching of the skills that a child is lacking. They are young, they're going to make mistakes. These mistakes are learning opportunities, but they won't absorb that on their own. They have to be taught the skills that they're lacking to enable them to apply a different behaviour response next time. If a consequence is necessary because perhaps some harm has been a result of their behaviour, this consequence should be protective or educational, or perhaps both. It shouldn't be delivered for a purely punitive reason. The protective consequence is there to keep them and everyone else around them safe, and the educational consequence is there to give them the skills they need to make a different, take a different approach next time. And then that personalised support needs to be supported by restorative approaches. This maintains the connection and belonging within their environment. So where we see our best practice, all of these things are in place, but certainly you'd expect some of them to be in place, if not all. We've got this fantastic quote here from a researcher in this area called Stuart Shankar. He says that children learn how to regulate their emotions through co-regulation. The better we can soothe them when they are agitated or support them when they are low, the better they absorb how to do this themselves. So it really is about our role as adults and the role of adults in schools and settings to support children to learn these skills. Okay, so the next section we have, we're going to provide some top tips for you for how you can support your child in their school or their setting with their behaviour. So first of all, share what you know about your child with their school or setting. You are the best stress detectives for your children because you know them better than anyone else. We're encouraging staff to be stress detectives and be curious, but you're holding huge amounts of knowledge about your child's needs and what works for them and what doesn't. So share that information. It will be really useful to the school and enable them to better meet their needs. Look after your own well-being. Quite often, as adults, we forget to do this when we are caring for other people, particularly young people. It is essential that you look after your own well-being. Firstly, so that you are in your window of tolerance and in the best position to support your child to stay in theirs. But also, by looking after your well-being, you are providing a model of how to develop self-regulation skills, and that is teaching them. When your child is stressed or distressed and showing you that through their behaviour, prioritise co-regulating them. By supporting them through their stress, you're making it more manageable for them and making them feel safe. And this will de-escalate their behaviours because they feel less danger by their environment because you've made them to feel safe. Please be patient, particularly with your schools or settings if they're having difficulty. This approach relies on quality relationships between the children and the adults, and that takes time. It's not a quick fix and it doesn't happen overnight, particularly if there's history of some tension or difficult relationships there. Give staff the tips that they need to get to know your child well, and then allow them some time to really develop that quality relationship. You can support this by connecting yourself with the adults in their school or setting as well. Children are surprisingly intuitive and they pick up on all of those interactions and dynamics and the emotions that you feel when engaging in conversations with their adults at school. So try and find positive ways to engage, and even if you are frustrated, which we know happens, try and find a way to communicate that is reflective and provides hope for the child as well. And then be hopeful yourself. Remember to celebrate your child's successes and their strengths. Recognise what is going well, because this enables them to have a platform to build hope for other things going well. And that will reinforce that with the adults in school or setting as well. So we've got some signposting for you to access some additional support and advice should you need it. So first of all, within your school or setting, find out who your designated mental health lead or your pastoral lead or your trauma perceptive practice lead is. Find out who's leading this for your school. Not every school will have a mental health lead or a TPP lead, but they will absolutely have someone whose role it is to lead on pupil wellbeing. So find out who this is, connect with them, ask them about the approaches they're taking. Share your knowledge with them as well, because that will be key to enabling them to be successful. There is a parent helpline run by our educational psychology service. This is for parents and carers of children up to the age of 19 years old. And you can call them to talk about any concerns you have about your child's education or development. What will happen during the call is you'll talk to a qualified educational psychologist who listen to your concerns and work with you to find a positive way forward. It will be a standalone piece of work. There wouldn't be a follow-up conversation, and it's confidential. You wouldn't have to share any personal details to have this consultation with them. The Essex Child and Family Wellbeing Service provide guidance through all of the stages of child development and also support for the whole family. The family hubs within the community are a great safe space to meet with others, access support. They provide the services such as the health visitors, parent support, school nursing, community health services, and they provide SEND support up to the age of 25 as well. Mental health support teams are available in some schools. They're an early intervention offer for children and families that supports wellbeing and support people to develop strategies to look after their mental health. So at a primary school age, mental health support teams will provide support to the family to encourage sustainability of the intervention. So they'll work with you as the parent or carer with how to support your child. But at a secondary school age, they will more likely work directly with the child to develop their own self-regulation strategies. And they can, of course, support you as well, but they'll more likely work with your child. Currently, we have mental health support teams across around 40% of schools have access to this, and the link that's on the presentation on the screen there's a list of all the schools that have access to mental health support teams, because it's not everywhere. But ask your school, if you're not sure, ask them if they have access and if that's something you could engage in. And of course there is the Essex Local Offer and the InfoLink portal. Now, the local offer has a section specifically on support for children and young people's emotional wellbeing, mental health needs, and therefore their behaviour. The InfoLink portal, it is a school-facing platform. However, there is a section on there where we've included some useful signposting sections for families and for children and young people. So by all means, have a look there as well, because there is some useful content there for families as well as for the schools and settings.